And now let's talk about Hulk Hogan, man. You want to talk about a game changer? He was it for WCW. And we're going to talk about how it all came to be. First, we're going to talk about Ric Flair's role in helping land Hulk Hogan. There's tons of quotes from your book, from his book, from Hulk's book. So we'll jump right into it. I guess we should sort of give some backstory. Hulk is off the WWF television program after King of the Ring. He does do that international tour. He works a handful of matches for New Japan. And somewhere along the way, you find yourself promoted to become the executive vice president of WCW. How quickly is it on your to-do list? Figure out what's up with Hulk Hogan.
Oh, I think that was probably about 60 or 90 days after I was promoted to executive producer. Maybe a little longer. I think I was promoted in March of 93. You probably know better than I do. And it really wasn't until 94 that I started talking to Hulk. So let's call it 6 months or so.
Talk to me a little bit about the Hulk Hogan idea. I mean, we've had conversations on the program before where I would say, hey, did you reach out to this guy or that guy? And you would say, no, as long as it didn't meet a certain threshold, salary wise, contract value wise, guys like Terry Taylor and Kevin Sullivan, they could go have some of these preliminary conversations. And that's not to say that they would ultimately make the deal. It still probably has to go through legal and contracts and all that stuff. But Hulk Hogan is not going to be one of those guys. Is this something where you felt like you needed to have a conversation with Ted Turner or someone higher up in the food chain of the organization about what that would need to look like? Or did you just think, let's go see if I can get him excited and we'll figure it out?
No, I wish it would have been that. 2 years later, it would have been that. But no, but in 94, keep in mind, WCW had still not turned a profit. Let's kind of back up. I was made executive producer and whatever that was in 93, because WCW was an unmitigated financial disaster and had been from the beginning of its life in Turner. In addition to having lost train cars full of money, tens of millions of dollars before I was put into management. And this was probably what hurt WCW more than anything internally, was the negative press. And that capped off, of course, by the Bill Watts, racial comments that were made. Bill Shaw came in and said, look, we're either going to turn this thing around and it's going to make a profit, or we're going to pull the plug, essentially, paraphrasing. But that was the message. So in 94, I was certainly in no position to go, I think I'm going to go spend $2 million on Hulk Hogan and I'll just tell Ted later. I'll give Bill a call at home over the weekend and let him know what I'm thinking. No, because I didn't know when I first started thinking about bringing Hulk in, I had no idea if he was, what that financial commitment would look like, but I knew I didn't have it in my budget.
Right.
Again, I've talked about this before. My budget in 94 was approved in 93. So there was no Hulk Hogan in my 93 conversations. Therefore, there was no budget for Hulk Hogan in my 94 budget. So when the opportunity came to even explore the possibility of a Hulk Hogan, the first person I went to was Bill Shaw. Because unless I had Bill's support, because I wasn't going to go to Ted. Ted didn't even know who I was.
Right.
I was just the next person that they're going to kind of put in charge of WCW and see what happens. So I went to Bill Shaw and said, Bill, I'd like to explore this. I have no idea what it's going to mean, if it's possible, how expensive it's going to be. But I think this could be, as you said in the opening of the show, a game changer for WCW. Do I have your permission to go hunting is pretty much what I asked for. And Bill went to Ted immediately. And Ted was very, very supportive immediately. So by the time I got to have my first conversation with Hulk, even though I didn't know financially what it was going to look like, I knew that I had the financial support, at least initially, from Ted and Bill Shaw.
When you're having that discussion, did you have a ballpark or a range? Or, you had to go in there with some sort of, if I can get him for this, you had to do some sort of napkin math where you have to say, all right, if we're paying him this, but we think we can do this in merch and this in pay-per-view, or you have to be able to work some sort of pro forma is what I'm driving at.
Right. Typically you would, but in this case we couldn't.
Right.
We didn't have a licensing business. Our licensing and merchandising business was at the, lemonade stand on a street corner kind of level compared to WWF. So it didn't really exist. We weren't really running house shows and had no plans to start running house shows again anytime in the near future until they became profitable. So we didn't have a pro forma that we could build off of that. And I'll be honest with you, Conrad, I didn't bring Hulk in to turn a profit initially. I brought Hulk Hogan in to change the narrative about WCW on the business to business side of the equation, not on the dirt sheet side of the equation, not even with wrestling fans, because I knew some of them would be very excited. Some of them wouldn't be, right? I knew that going in. So I wasn't hoping that Hulk Hogan showing up was going to take our ratings. And at that time, WCW Nitro, and I don't know, WCW Saturday Night before Nitro, it was the highest rated show on the network, on Saturdays, obviously. And I guess we were delivering about 4 to 5 million viewers a week. It wasn't that I thought that Hulk Hogan showing up on WCW Saturday Night was going to increase those ratings so dramatically that we were going to start making a lot more money. I did believe that Hulk Hogan in pay-per-views, because that really was what his deal was. It was 4 pay-per-views a year was his initial deal. That's where I hoped that we could at least recoup, if not all, but the majority of the money that we had to pay Hulk. So I went into Hulk Hogan in 1994. I went into that deal with Hulk Hogan in 1994. Once we knew what it was going to be, the 4 pay-per-views a year, we knew ultimately at least initially it was $500,000 per pay-per-view. And at least initially, I think there were 4 TVs leading up to each one of those pay-per-views. My hope, once we got that far into the math, was that we could at least break even on that $2 million a year. And that bringing Hulk Hogan in would change the conversation that we were having with potential sponsors and licensing companies and our pay-per-view partners and advertising and ad agencies. That's where I was hoping to change the conversation. But I went into it. I know this is going to sound the wrong way, but if I could break even with Hulk Hogan the first 2 years, we were happy. Bill would have been happy. Ted would have been happy. It wasn't going in with any kind of pressure of an immediate return on investment.